to throw. One-on-one, Davis has it. Touchdown! Carolina wins! Carolina is the Coastal Division champion! Javonte Williams to the left of Howe. He'll send him out into the flat right side. Howe looking, standing tall, lets it go. Man there! Touchdown! Touchdown, Carolina! The pistol, Jackson behind him. Hands off to Jackson. He tried a jump pass, and it's intercepted! Surratt intercepts it! Holy cow, Carolina's gonna win! And off to Javonte Williams again, pops it to the left. Javonte leaps over a man, crosses the 50, trucks over a defender, spins by another. Goodness gracious, he's down to about the 15, and he did absolutely everything in one carry.
Here's the shotgun snap to Aguilar. Drops back, pressure coming, Aguilar floats it up, incomplete! No flags! Head on back up the mountain! Carolina wins it in double overtime! Loftus, out of the shotgun, throws to the end zone, incomplete! Incomplete! The bell belongs to us! Carolina wins it 47-45 in double overtime!
Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Blog Podcast. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, here with you guys, as always, on a Wednesday night here as the Tar Heels. They make a huge addition to their defensive side of the football, one that we have been waiting on for a while, and we had to get on here and talk about that with you guys. Josh hasn't been on in a while, so what is his state of the Carolina defense as a whole? Really just the roster as a whole, as Carolina has landed a lot of different guys here over the last few weeks. After we came on here and we're talking about how this team wasn't really in the greatest spot, and we were frustrated with where they're at. Have they done enough to satisfy us at this point? And are they a team that's going to be able to be as competitive as we thought they could possibly be when Bill Belichick was hired? We'll talk about that. And yes, we have to still talk about what's going on with Bill Belichick and the off-the-field stuff, because Pablo Torre, with an interesting report that it turned out to not be true, but now a new report that came out just a couple of days ago that states that Bill Belichick may not even make it to the first game as the Tar Heels head coach. Josh has told you that he believes that that's going to happen. Does this sort of justify that and make us think that it's even closer to that being the truth? Or what do we make of all that? We'll talk about that. And of course, we'll also mention what Bill Belichick said in his ESPN interview. It's basically going to be about the Jordon Hudson stuff, because let's be real honest, he didn't say anything else that had any substance to it. It was just a complete layup and frankly, an interview that should not have even been done because it really didn't prove anything to us. So we'll have all that for you here tonight. But as I mentioned, we've got to start with Andrew Simpson, the commitment that Carolina has been looking for a while now. This is a big one because Carolina now has their middle linebacker. They were searching for that guy. Kamori House is more of a hybrid, linebacker / safety. He's a guy that's going to drop into coverage more often than not. That's typically what you're going to want from him. And then you've got Mekhi Bayor, who Carolina brought in earlier this offseason, earlier in this spring window, actually. And he's a guy that, you like, you think there's some things that he can do. There's some tools there. But honestly, you look at him as probably a guy that's going to succeed as that third guy. That's what we were thinking when Carolina originally brought him in, when Carolina still had Amari Campbell on the roster. And so now you get in Simpson, and this is a guy that, as a former 3-star prospect in the 2022 recruiting class, immediately came to Boise State, started playing, saw action in 40 games in those 3 years, including 25 starts. This past season as a junior, finished with 45 total tackles, 11 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, 24 total quarterback pressures, had 3 forced fumbles, and did come down with 1 interception. So a guy that can do a lot of different things for you. But look, this wasn't even his best year. His sophomore year was really where he broke out. And this is what has Tar Heel fans feeling like he can replicate or possibly even overproduce what we saw from Amari Campbell last year. As a sophomore, 66 total tackles, 16 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks, 33 total quarterback pressures, 2 forced fumbles, and 2 interceptions. So a guy that is going to be better in coverage than Amari Campbell, but I don't know if he's necessarily going to be the guy that's going to be able to get the type of pressure that we saw Amari Campbell get on the quarterback, or the tackle for loss type of guy that we saw Amari Campbell become. Now, if he turns it back to that sophomore season, then it's certainly possible, but I'm not sure that that's exactly what we're going to get. Still, this is a massive pickup. It gives Carolina a starter, and when you look at him, he's probably the second or third biggest pickup that Carolina has made this offseason. Depends on what your feelings are about Gio Lopez. I think most people would probably agree the biggest pickup for Carolina this offseason was Thaddeus Dixon, the cornerback out of Washington. He has a chance to be a guy that is not only an all-conference caliber player, but potentially could be an all-American caliber player if he can build off of what he did at Washington. This is still a guy that is a huge pickup, though. And I'm sure that when you saw the news earlier today, buddy, you probably felt the same way that we did, at least a sense or a leap that Carolina's got a starter in that linebacker room.
Well, this was kind of the cementing piece, if you will, to what Bill Belichick and the staff have done over the last week and a half, 2 weeks, maybe going back to 3 weeks, which the roster has steadily improved since we came on here and complained about it, because why wouldn't it? This has been someone that, Carolina fans have been eyeing for a while. This has been a name we've been rumored to be been told was coming our way, that we were in the lead to get his services. But you had to wait and see it, cross the finish line before you could believe it, because this is I think a significant pickup, because yes, you now have your middle linebacker, which is important. I think just the fact he's coming from a program that has a winning pedigree will be a great culture fit for Bill Belichick, for Stephen Belichick on that defensive side of the football. And I do think in the short term, for someone like me who has had to voice a lot of concerns about Bill Belichick off the field and raise my doubts and concerns about how this thing's going to go, I do think getting a pickup like this should lead us to believe that when it's time to get down to football, it's going to be about football. That's what Bill Belichick said the other day when he spoke on ESPN, that he's excited for upcoming training camp and all that. And that this was, I think, sign and proof that this staff is still putting in the work in the portal to get this roster in a spot to compete this year. Is it where we thought it was going to be when he got hired? No, it's not. Do you wish this was being added to a defense that didn't lose a Bo Atkinson and Amari Campbell? Absolutely. That's not the reality of the situation. So, on the surface, I think you put this right up there. Gio Lopez, Thaddeus Dixon, and then Simpson right here today. However you want to order them is up to you. Those are the 3 most significant pickups that the Tar Heels have made so far this transfer portal cycle. And it does help this roster in more ways than one, as we're getting closer to figuring out what that final roster will look like for this upcoming season.
Yeah, I mean, you said you'd like to add it to a defense where you had Amari Campbell and you had Bo Atkinson. I don't think this happens if you have Amari Campbell. If you have Campbell, then there's no need to add him to this defense. I don't see where he really fits in, unless you're going with 2 more traditional linebackers, 2 guys that are really going to help you a lot in the run game. I get it. He was good in coverage, but he didn't even grade out as well as Amari Campbell did in coverage. Or if he did, I'm trying to remember, but I believe they were really close to each other in terms of their coverage grades. So I think this is a guy that was coming here only if you lost Amari Campbell to the transfer portal. But, I think that wanting to keep Bo Atkinson, that's the important part. If they kept Bo Atkinson, we could have the conversation, is this defense already on paper better than last year's defense? I think with Bo Atkinson gone, I think with where the edge rusher spot is at, I don't necessarily feel comfortable saying that this defense is better than last year's defense. And that's not great. I think you're hoping that what's going to end up happening is that although this team doesn't have the talent that last year's defense had, that you will see a group that will sort of grow up pretty quickly because of their head coach, will develop very well because of their head coach, and become a team that as the season goes along is to be reckoned with on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, where do you stand with that in terms of where this roster is overall on the defensive side of the ball? Because to me, I think now you've got the talent and you've got the depth at linebacker and defensive back. I think defensive back, you're better than you were a year ago. I think linebacker, you're very close to even, maybe just a slight bit less talented than you were a year ago. But you've got the depth there now with them also adding Tamir Hickman Collins from since the last time that we were on here. Another guy, former 3-star recruit at Florida State, a guy that comes from Indian Land High School down in Fort Mill, so a local kid as well. But, I still question that defensive line, even the interior of that group, where I like guys like DeAndre Robinson and Isaiah Johnson, but I just don't necessarily know if I can trust that group because I still don't think they're nearly as talented or as deep in that room as they were a year ago.
Yeah, the front four is to be determined. I think your back seven in totality is as talented as last year's, and I think it's clearly deeper than it was a year ago with how many linebackers they've added this offseason in the portal as well. We're banking on Bill Belichick and his son being able to develop. It still comes down to player development. That's the biggest sin that Mac Brown and his staff committed during his second tenure in Chapel Hill, was that they never developed the talent that he was able to get into the program. But I think what we're really relying and banking on, especially this year while we're waiting for a first full recruiting class for Belichick and his staff, is them to be able to out-scheme their opponent, because you've just got so much NFL experience on that side of the ball. And so can you scheme up pressures that you haven't been able to scheme up the past couple of years, mainly just because you haven't had the defensive philosophy that Carolina has, the defensive mindset that Carolina has, and its coaching staff. And that's not to take a shot at the former assistants. That's just, there's a difference in intellect between a college coordinator and an NFL coordinator, and a college defensive, a college position coach and an NFL position coach. And so that's what you're really banking on, I think, this in year one on the defensive side, is can they scheme up some stuff defensively to maybe overcome the lack of talent up front? If they can do that, then I think this defense can still be average. And if this defense is average, I think Carolina has a chance to, A, be competitive, and B, maybe put themselves in a position to win the type of games and win the number of games we want to win in year one. If this defense gives up, north of 30 points per game week in, week out, I don't know how far this team is going, because I can't tell you that this team's going to be explosive on offense. I can't. Last 5 years, I could tell you, I know Carolina's going to score, but can they stop people? If they can hold teams to 24, 25 points per game on an average basis, I don't know how many games Carolina ultimately wins. I do think that I could say with confidence Carolina competes in every game. And I think, we're here to win, but, I don't know where I felt 3 weeks ago about what the number of wins, how competitive they could be on that side of the ball. So I think you really got to give Belichick and Michael Lombardi and the staff some credit, because with all the distractions off the field, they've been putting their head down, rolling up their sleeves to go in the work. And I think they've got this roster in as good a spot as you could ask for it to be, considering all they've lost to the portal and, of course, to the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of wish that they would have done a little more work on the defensive line probably earlier in the offseason. I think you would have liked to see more guys in that fall portal at that defensive tackle spot. But to be fair, I think they might have thought that the guys in that room would step up and that there would be some guys that would emerge, like Joel Starlings, like Rodney Laura. And I think they just learned once they got into camp that those guys weren't necessarily where they needed to be. And so they had to pivot. They went and found a guy in DeAndre Robinson, who I think is really, really good. I think has a chance, after playing a pretty decent amount of snaps for a true freshman, you're banking on him being a better player. Isaiah Johnson, a guy that's, sort of been trapped on depth charts, but last year played the most that he's ever played at the college level and was pretty effective when he was on the field. You're banking on guys. That's the thing that you're looking at with that group, is that you're looking at guys that have upside but haven't necessarily proven it. Where the other two rooms, you've got guys that have proven that they can play at this level and that they can do it at a high rate. You got guys that are familiar with Stephen Belichick. I think the thing that you've got to be able to do is you've got to be able to trust Bill and Stephen. And with Stephen, I think you would get asked the question, well, how do we really trust him? He's only been at the college level for 1 year. But the thing is that the 1 year that he was at the college level last year, he took over a team in Washington that did not have a ton of talent on it and turned that into one of the better defenses in the Big Ten. The problem was they weren't a great offensive team, and there were still moments where they would let up big plays. They've got to figure out now, how do you manifest pressure from your defensive line? How do you create those tackles for loss? How do you create those sacks and those quarterback pressures? Because right now, I don't know if those guys are on the roster. The big thing for me is that I think the biggest hole still remaining is the edge rusher spot. I don't think they have a legitimate edge rusher outside of Price Yates. And that scares the hell out of me because I don't know where that other guy is coming from. I wish that you could go into the portal and get somebody. It seems like it's too late. This is one where you would have liked for them to go out and get somebody a little bit more experienced at the Power 4 level than a guy like Milkart Abu-Jowdy, who I think they were banking on as being their third guy. This is where, losing Bo Atkinson really hurts you, and you are unfortunately not able to replace him because you could say whatever you want. And I've been talking to some guys that we work with, and, there was a couple of guys in particular that are saying you just don't know what these guys can be at this level, especially when they get the right coaching and especially when they get coaching from Bill Belichick. I find it hard to believe that Smith Vilbert is going to be what we saw from a guy like Bo Atkinson. Even, Joseph McCoy, a guy who was a 4-star caliber prospect coming out of high school, but hasn't really played at Penn State, enters the transfer portal. Do we really believe that those guys are all of a sudden going to break out of their shell and that the previous stats and, the fact that one of them wasn't even able to really get on the field at all shows you that, this is just about development and that all of a sudden Carolina is going to have these breakout players? I just don't know that you're going to get that. So we'll have to wait and see, but the defense certainly looking a little bit better. Now, quickly, let me ask you about the offense. They've made some decent additions here in the spring portal, not nearly as many as the offensive side of the ball. They did land Jordan Owens, a guy who transferred from Central Arkansas to Oklahoma State earlier this offseason, now transferring again to add to that tight end room where they, of course, added Shamar Easter here recently. When you look at the offensive side of the ball, I mean, clearly the room where the transfers are going to have the most impact is going to be the offensive line and the quarterback spot, because we believe that Gio Lopez is probably going to be the guy at quarterback. But you said defensively, you don't think the talent is necessarily where you thought it was going to be. What about the offensive side of the ball? How do you feel there?
I think the bigger question I have about where Carolina is offensively, and maybe at some point this gets addressed, I just don't know what to expect from the offense. Like, we haven't quite been told, are we going to be a spread? I mean, I imagine they're going to run spread. Is this going to be an offense that's going to live in the no huddle? Is this going to be an offense that works at a much more deliberate pace? I mean, the only thing we've heard about what this team is going to aspire to be is when Michael Lombardi joined ACC PM 2 weeks ago and said we're going to be physical and that they want to be good in the trenches. So, whether the talent is there or not, we know there's going to be a downgrade at the quarterback position. That was, maybe it's going to be an upgrade depending on if Gio Lopez actually makes that transition, from the group of five to the power five level. But until I know what this offense aspires to be, I think it's really hard to evaluate them. Because if there's one thing you can say that Mac Brown did, he recruited that side of the ball really well. Like, we know that there is talent in that wide receiver room. Yes, you maybe need to get a guy that emerges as a legitimate deep threat, take the top off the defense, but they've got guys at that position that I think are capable of making plays. The same thing at the running back spot. I think they're going to be fine there from a talent perspective. It really just what do you want to be as an offense, and then then can we evaluate from there? And the sad part is we will not know until they take the field for the season opener. Because if the spring was any indication, I don't know how much access we're going to have to this team in the fall in training camp. I don't know how much Bill Belichick is going to talk. And so it really does make it hard to evaluate that side of the ball. If Freddie Kitchens can be a quality play caller, I think they've got enough of the right pieces to put together an offense that scores 28, 30, 32 points per game next season. And if they can do that, they'll put themselves in position to win, in my opinion, 7 to 8 games.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the range that I'm looking at, and that was the range that I thought Carolina was going to be in year one under Bill Belichick. I did not expect that this would be a team that would be in Charlotte. I think there are some people that were expecting that because they felt like the amount of talent that he would be able to bring in combined with his coaching acumen would really pay off, and all of a sudden we'd be looking at an instant contender. I don't think that was realistic. I think 8-4 is probably a realistic, not expectation, but a hope. I think the expectation should probably be 7-5. I think that's a safe area to say, this is what I should expect from my team. I think that my team should be, a winning team at the end of the season, regardless of what happens in their bowl game. And you should be building towards next year. And I feel like offensively, it feels like they're kind of positioned to do that just a little bit. Although you look at some of the guys that they brought in along the offensive line, a lot of one-year guys, a lot of guys that they're hoping are going to help them this year. And you talked about, Gio Lopez has to take that leap from the group of five level to the power five level. What does that look like? It's the same question on the offensive line. When you look at the guys that they have brought in out of the transfer portal, Christo Kelly jumps from FCS to FBS and then into a power five conference. Daniel King jumps from the group of five to the power four. Ja'Kai Moore, that's a guy that's P4 to P4, but a guy whose numbers aren't necessarily great, and you've got to figure out how exactly he would fit in. Willow Steen making that jump from the group of five to the power four. William Boone, FCS to power four. Jordan Hall, group of five to power four. So we're talking about all of these different guys that you've added in that room. I forgot Chad Lindbergh too, another guy that started his career at a power conference school, but is once again one of those guys that's making the leap because where he succeeded was at Rice, going from the group of five, trying to see that same type of production when he gets to the power four level. So you're asking a lot out of this group, man. That's the thing that really concerns me. I mean, you're talking about with Austin Blaske added in there, you're talking about 6 guys that Carolina has along their offensive line that are one-year guys. Now, mean, the depth is still decent there, but that's going to be a position where once again, next offseason, they're going to have to hit it pretty hard. So that room was built for this year. Are they good enough? Are they better than last year's unit? I don't know. I think honestly, based off of what we saw in the Practice Like a Pro event, there's reasons to doubt it. There's reasons to believe that this group is not necessarily where it needs to be to help Carolina compete right away this season, especially with you not being able to count on some of the skill positions like you've been able to in years past. So, I mean, I would say the offensive lines may be slightly worse than last year. Maybe, they end up evening out, as we go throughout fall camp. I know they're worse at tight end. I know that's an area where they probably are worried right now because they just don't have anybody that has any sort of legitimate production outside of Jake Johnson, who they look at as a guy that if you look at the snaps that he played last year, they look at him as more of a run blocker, not really a guy that can catch the football. So who's going to catch the football there is the question. Wide receiver, you lost a lot of production there. You only have one guy that's really produced anything consistent in Kobe Paysour, so that room's worse. And then running back, of course, you're worse. Now, how much worse, I think, is going to be the question, and that's going to determine a lot, but there is going to be a drop-off. You don't have the generational talent like you had in Amari and Hampton that's back there. So I think this, the offense is probably a little bit worse. The defense is probably a slight bit worse, maybe closer to even, depending on what you believe. And then, it'll all come down to the coaching. That's where it ultimately sits at this point, is does this staff that Carolina has put together, that Bill Belichick has pieced together, is this staff enough to help this team out immediately and turn them into an immediate contender and one that can win 8, maybe even 9 games? If they are as great as we think they are, then they're going to have a chance to do that. But if not, I just don't know if there is the talent on this roster right now to be able to get to where we thought Carolina was going to be in their first season, or where some fans thought Carolina was going to be in their first season, which is competing to get to Charlotte.
Well,
right,
I don't mean to interrupt you. I think
go ahead.
I think where the frustration lied in with the roster not being where we thought it was going to be when we talked last is that if Carolina did improve the roster the way we thought they were going to, and if the coaching is what we think the coaching is, I know we probably said this a lot. It's a very manageable schedule, man. Like there's a lot of games that if Carolina is better coached and if they're scoring 28 to 30 points per game and they're doing what they can do defensively, they're going to win a lot more games than they've won under Mac Brown the last couple of years. And I think you're banking on that. I don't think we expect to lose games the way that we've lost them under Bill Belichick like we did with Mac. And we love Mac to death, but there was that old saying that you love Mac Brown on Sunday through Friday, but you hate him sometimes on Saturday. And that was the case a lot of times where you look at some of the losses that this team suffered the last couple of years. It was them getting mainly outcoached and out schemed out everything. So if Carolina does have that internal development that we've talked about, if this coaching staff is worth the price of that Bill Belichick requested to put the staff together, then there is a schedule here that can lend Carolina winning a lot of games. Because I don't know, outside of Clemson and I guess the Syracuse game, how many games there'll be a definite underdog in. I know the FanDuel win-loss over-runners came out today. I think it was FanDuel. They had them at 7.5. So, that right there tells you that even with all the question marks about them, the betting marks are going to have this team at that probably 7.5. Maybe they top out at 8.5. And a big reason why is that schedule. So, if they take the steps forward that they need to take, and they're better coached, this schedule does lend to them winning, I think, a lot more games than maybe you'd anticipated originally. and especially after you lost to guys like Amari Campbell and Bo Atkinson to the portal.
No, this is a perfect schedule for a first-time head coach and for a guy, first-time college head coach, and for a guy that we really just don't know what exactly we're going to get. This is one that you can navigate pretty easily. And I think this roster is good enough to get them through a lot of these games. But I don't know when you get to some of those toss-up games, if you had just a little bit more talent, the toss-up games, I think, would go in your direction. And all of a sudden, we'd be talking about that 9-10 win type of team. But I think right now, it's okay to look at this roster and say to yourself, I just don't feel like this roster is as good as we thought it was going to be. I don't think that this roster is as good on paper as the starters were from last year. There's areas that they could be better. And here's the other thing that you got to remember about all this. We're saying this. We could come back after the first week of the year and we could tell you, man, this team is much better, or man, this team is much worse than we thought. We have no idea. We haven't been told anything about this team. I said it, and this is the room more than any that I am most frustrated that we haven't heard from him about. Wide receiver. We could have a great wide receiver group. We could have guys breaking out. You could have Jordan Shipp looking like the star that we thought he could possibly be. Chris Culliver looking like the star that we thought he could be coming out of high school. We don't know because we don't get told anything about this roster. We have not been, again, when he was on ESPN, he did not say anything about the actual team itself, about any specific players, nothing like that. He's not going to do a press conference anytime soon, I wouldn't expect. This was, what he did down there at Amelia Island on SportsCenter. That's all you're going to get from him. He did not want, even when they asked him about expectations for this year's team, he said, we're going to take it day by day. So he's not wanting to give you really anything about this team. And that's what makes it so tough. That's what makes it tough for us to come on here and tell you where exactly we feel like this team is at right now. But if we're just judging on paper, on the talent that's here, the experience that's here, based on what we've seen coming out of high school or coming out of the transfer portal, I think this roster is slightly worse. But yes, you're right. The schedule sets up where if the roster is a slight bit worse, but you've got a coach that can develop talent at a much higher rate and that knows how to win on game days, unlike Mac Brown seemed to be able to do at times, then you're going to have a chance to have success. Let's get to the Pablo Torre stuff, and we'll get to the Belichick when he was on SportsCenter. Play a cut of that here. We're not going to spend too much time on this because we're already 30 minutes into the podcast, so we don't want to spend too much more time on this. I know you guys are definitely excited to find out about your NFL team schedule and everything like that, but we got to react to this. Pablo Torre reported last week that Jordon Hudson had been banned from all UNC football facilities. And then, the Tar Heel Athletics very quickly, within probably about an hour, 2 hours of the initial report, they immediately come out and say this is not true. Credit to Andrew Jones and Inside Carolina. They had it even before the athletic department put out that statement. They did the research and found out this is in fact not true. She is allowed at all athletic facilities and is not banned. And Pablo Torre, to his credit, said that he knew that this was going to happen. He knew there was going to be pushback, and he stood behind his 11 sources that he had for releasing this podcast edition and eventually a short article on what exactly they had found. It feels like there is a standoff here between the UNC fan base and Pablo Torre. Many people do not want to believe him, even though this is what he does now. He is an investigative journalist. This is what he has dedicated his life to, and this is what that podcast is about. I think that there are a lot of things about this that probably are true. I think that some of the stuff specifically about Jordon Hudson being as self-conceited, and as a little bit crazy, borderline crazy as she is, I think that's 100% true. I think everything that you needed to see, you saw during that CBS This Morning interview. I think she wants to control everything that is said. She wants to control him. And I think that's part of why, she likes being in the relationship that she's in. The biggest thing is that when you got down to it, there was this cut from Pablo Torre, and this one, this is the one that I think you have to wonder, is there some truth to it? Because if there is, then you would say to yourself, well, this is a terrible situation. Here's Pablo Torre saying that he thinks there is a chance, based off of what he has heard, that Bill Belichick does not even coach a single game as the head coach of Carolina.
Date that matters the most is June 1st. So when this contract was reported, Dominique, when the terms of Belichick's Carolina contract that made him the highest paid public employee in the state were announced, everybody who follows contractual language pointed out that on June 1st, the buyout of Bill Belichick goes from $10 million to $1 million if Bill wanted the escape hatch, right? So if he wanted out, suddenly it was very interesting that the amount got 10 times less after June 1st. And so the question everybody is asking is, are things so dysfunctional behind the scenes when it comes to the power struggle, when it comes to what they are telling Bill to do? Don't have Jordon around anymore. Stop behaving in the way that you have. Basically telling him for the first time, really, right, that you're an employee and not the boss of this building in the way that he may have been assuming he would be. Then there is the ability for him to get out of it.
All right. So you are someone that has been very vocal on the fact that you think that with everything that's going on, if they were to lay down an ultimatum like this, that Bill probably would end up leaving, and that there is a chance that he will not be the head coach for Carolina for a single game. Where do you stand on that now? And do these reports from Pablo Torre sort of justify that and make you think that there's a better chance that actually happens?
Yeah, first off, Pablo Torre was a lot more cooler when he was Pablo S. Torre, and he was appearing on Around the Horn, PTI, and really carrying Bomani Jones during his time at ESPN before Bomani Jones was once again fired because he can't produce ratings. Nonetheless, I still have my doubts and my concerns, because I think what Bill Belichick maybe was not prepared for is, yes, in the NFL you work for an owner, and he worked for a very influential owner in Robert Kraft, and a very powerful owner, but you just work for one guy in the NFL. In college, you're a state employee. You're working for boosters, which I guess you could basically say are like our owners, because they are the ones that fund your program. And then you've got a whole other, board that you gotta respond to. And so what my concern was that because what was happening and what she was doing was a direct embarrassment of the school that employs him. And so if it ever got to the point where they said, hey, you're not representing the UNC brand the way that we're paying you $10 million to, something's got to give here. I think the concern is that he would choose his personal life over coaching football. I guess I still have my doubts and concerns that maybe that all still happens. I know that interview was a big old nothing burger the other day in terms of substance, but I don't know. Maybe because I want to believe in it, because I believed in the hire as much as anybody that covers this team. I still think he'll be here for at least one season. What I do think this has done is maybe, accelerate that clock for how long he wants to do the college thing. When he got hired, I really bought into, hey, this is his final stop. He's going to be here 3 to 5 years. He's going to, honor his father's legacy and all that. That was a bunch of crap. All the stuff about his dad was good PR by Jordon Hudson at the time, but that version of that PR when he got hired and the whole beat Duke, that version of Bill Belichick we have not seen really since his introductory press conference. So I still think he'll be here for the season, but I don't know if he'll be here for as long as I was under the belief he would be here, which was I thought he'd end his coaching career on the sidelines in Chapel Hill. I think he'll be looking for the first ticket out of town when we know those 6 to 7 jobs that come open every year in the NFL come open next December.
Yeah, to me, he was always going to be looking at those jobs. He wants to get back to the NFL. He wants to be coaching at that level. He just does because he wants to catch Don Shula. Now, you could say, and this is something that people are saying based on his SportsCenter interview, that he is not the same coach, that he is a guy that is softer because in the past he wouldn't give nearly as much. And yes, this is real stuff that people have told me, that they believe that he has lost his edge because he seems more chipper and happy when he answers these questions. That shows you that he is not necessarily the same tough and grizzled guy that you had in the NFL. I don't really know. Maybe this is the best thing that ever happened to him in his life. Maybe, the 2 relationships that he was in really were that bad. And he really was just a miserable old guy. Maybe he's a guy that realizes that, this is an experience that he wants to be a little bit different, and that maybe that sort of mindset that he had at the NFL level isn't going to work at this level. Remember, we talked about that when Carolina initially made the hire. I don't know what it is. That to me is a little crazy. I don't know that you have to necessarily be worried about that. I mean, yeah, I guess there's a little bit of concern over, is he nearly as motivated as he was when he was younger? But that's just a natural concern that you're going to have with an older coach. Like we saw it with Mac Brown. He wasn't nearly as driven, it didn't feel like, as the first time he was in Chapel Hill. And what do you expect? He was a young coach at that time. He hadn't caught his break. So, yeah, you're not getting Bill Belichick, the head coach who took over the New England Patriots, but you are hoping that you still have a guy that with his football mindset is going to be able to come in, is going to be able to motivate the group that's there in front of him, and is going to be able to put this behind him. And here's what he said when he was asked about the relationship with Jordon Hudson and ultimately its effect on Carolina football.
I mean, that's, really off to the side. It's a personal relationship, and she doesn't have anything to do with UNC football. I'm excited to be back in the coaches' meetings and getting ready for, June, and then August when we get to training camp. So June will be a big recruiting month for us, and then August we'll start getting ready for the season.
And I know that you're not on social media and you don't read as much as everybody else has seen, but when it comes to having conversations with your players, have you been able to talk about any of those things and the specifics of what's going on off the field?
Yeah, no, I talk to the players, and when we meet with them, when they come in to visit and so forth, sure.
And how have those conversations gone?
Yeah, great. Well, again, we want to make the players the best that they can be, provide them the best opportunity on and off the field, and that's what we're about at UNC, and that's what we do the best for every single player we have.
Okay.
All right. So, yeah, again, really digging deep with some of those answers there. But the first one I thought was interesting, and the fact that he has talked with the players, I think, shows you that he knows that this is a storyline, that this can be seen as a distraction. And to me, I think it's a good move from him, and he should be commended for sitting his players down and talking to them and saying, look, there's not much here. This is what, is being talked about in the media, but believe me, I am focused on football. Because here's the thing, if you just ignore it, there are going to be some guys, and you can't say, no, everybody's bought in. Yeah, most of the guys on the roster are probably bought in, but there probably are a few guys out there that are looking at this and saying, man, our coach is really, this is where the focus is right now. He's focused on a book tour. He's focused on having to answer these types of questions and focused on his relationship. So I think it makes sense that he spoke to these guys, and I commend him for that. The thing about it is, when it comes to what he actually said right there, what do you expect him to say? He's not going to tell you right out, yeah, this is going to have an effect on how I coach. Of course, he's going to steer you in the other direction and say, no, it's not going to have an effect on how I coach. She's not going to be involved with Carolina football. And here's the thing. If you're worried that she's going to be calling plays this season or something like that, yeah, you're going out on a limb. Even I personally, I know you disagree with me on this. I don't think she's going to be on the field. People that say, oh, well, she'll be on the field because she was on the field for the practice like a pro event. That's a practice. That's a spring game. Of course, they're going to there were recruits literally standing right on the sidelines. During games, those guys are sitting in the stands. It's much different. I don't think she's going to be on the field, but I do think she is going to be involved. She is going to have control of a lot of the PR stuff. She is basically his agent, and that's something that you're going to have to deal with. Guys, here's the thing. Coaches have crazy agents. Coaches have guys around them or gals that are a little bit off. I mean, let's be honest. This can't be the first time that a coach has had a wife or a girlfriend that has been, a little bit hands-on and stuff like that. I don't think we've seen anything close to this level, but I do think that, when it comes time for football, there is a chance that Bill Belichick is going to be able to put this aside, and then it will not be that big of a storyline. But to me, there's always going to be that chance that it is. And the only way that we're going to find out is when we get to the season. You can think that it's not. You can argue till you're blue in the face. You can tell us you guys are morons for doing these podcasts and all this. I know there are people that have said that. But we're not going to know until we get in season. And yes, it is a part of the storyline with Bill Belichick. It has to be talked about. And so that's the reason that I thought it was important to get on here and talk about it tonight. But, ultimately, I think you're probably where I am. I think that this was a big moment because it does make you feel a little bit better, even if it's complete bullcrap. Even if he's lying and it turns out that she's going to be involved, hell, she's going to be telling Freddie Kitchens what plays to run on offense. It doesn't matter. He did what he needed to do this week. But I ultimately think you have to wait until the season to find out what exactly is going to happen and just how involved she's going to be.
Yeah, this was all about damage control. The interview you'll see on Friday with Strahan, damage control. Coaches' wives have involvement with their programs. They're a big part of the culture that is ultimately set within the program. But you don't ever see them. You don't ever hear about them. Unless, Mac Brown would reference Sally, Roy Williams would reference Wanda. And that would be the extent of it. They'd be referenced. You'd see them. Maybe the camera would pick them up when they were telling a funny story about the coach's wife during the game, and that was the extent of it. And that's what it has to be. That's what it needs to be for Jordon Hudson. She's going to be involved, and she needs to be a part of the culture that he's trying to establish off the field, this family-type environment. But that's where it starts, and that's where it ends. Like, her being on the field at practice should not – whether she's his agent, whether they're doing their own documentary or not, because that in and of itself becomes a distraction. And so hopefully he learned that from the practice, like the pro event, which led to multiple articles being written, mainly by Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk, who's got, who knows how to write an article and make you think one way or another. And so I do think, this is kind of an adjustment period for Belichick to where, no, the college football isn't as popular as the NFL? No. Are your fan bases more rabid and more insane? Yes. And so you got to understand that for Carolina fans, like especially those that live and die and breathe with UNC football, when they see the involvement she's having, we're going to freak out, and we're going to start to panic, which is not a good thing. So hopefully, when we get to fall camp, we're not being told she's miking them up at practice, and we're not seeing her walking around the practice field. And that's just the reality of the situation. Like, it's not that I don't think that women don't have a place in football, because that's not what I think. Like, we have women coaches, you have women trainers, and all that type of stuff. but you do not need to have your girlfriend as present as she was to where her involvement became a bigger storyline than what your team did on the field. And if that bleeds over into fall camp and into the season, that will become a distraction that you cannot block out because everyone and their mother will be talking about it. And so we'll it's now we're in wait and see mode. I think he's come out and kind of said the right things and has done the right things since, the whole interview with CBS News this morning went the way that it did. But as long as, something like that doesn't happen again, then I think when we finally get to camp and we can actually just start talking football, we can do edition of the podcast where we just talk football and not about our head coach's girlfriend.
Yeah, it would also help if you could give us a little something, Bill. One of these interviews, feel free to do one before the start of fall camp where you tell us about your roster and you tell us about how you feel about certain rooms and stuff like that. That would help you. That's the thing that I've been saying over these past few weeks is that you don't want us to talk about this stuff off the field. Then give us something else to talk about. If we could actually talk about your team, we would. Like if we had all this information on the roster, we would not talk about this. This podcast would not. Or if we did mention it, it would be something that we mentioned quickly and we moved on from. There's nothing else to talk about with this program. You can project as much as you want. Today, one of those days where we get a big guy in the transfer portal, we're going to break him down. And we did that. But when there's other times where, okay, what do we talk about on this week's edition of the podcast? And the only thing that's happened is, here's another crazy story involving Jordon Hudson and her involvement with Carolina on the field. And it is affecting. This is one thing that it did affect. And this is where she's got to do a better job in what she's trying to do. HBO wanting to film Hard Knocks would have been massive for this program. It would have been humongous attention. And you could say, and I said at the time when Carolina missed out on it, one of the things that you do look at it and say in that moment is it takes some of the pressure off these guys because they've never really thrived with pressure before. Man, you got Bill Belichick as your head coach. There's pressure. That would have been monumental for Carolina to be able to show their process, what they were doing, and what it is like to be coached by Bill Belichick. You want to land even more guys on the 2026 trail, you have Hard Knocks come in there and show them what it's actually like to be a part of the program. Because when that aired, guys would have been very intrigued to watch it and say, oh, I can handle that. Or, no, that's not necessarily for me. Take me off the board. So she's got to do a better job because that's something that as a PR person, you should know that is going to be massive PR for your program. You should have been all over that, wanted that to happen, and did just about anything that you possibly could to make that happen. So that's the area that she needs to be a little bit better in. But we'll see, man. I think right now, it comes down to one thing. And Alan Lundy said it here. I don't really care about her. I just want to win. That's the thing. And right now, until we get to the season, we can't tell you whether or not this team is going to win. If they go into this season, they win 8 games, we're going to be sitting here talking about Bill Belichick and the success that he's having at Carolina. If this team goes into the season, she is, surrounding a lot of the storylines, and this team wins 5 or 6 games, we're going to be pissed. And we're going to be on here talking about her and her involvement in the program and how this is, potentially limiting one of the greatest coaches of all time from being able to do the job that he does. As you saw right there, no matter which storyline ends up happening, we're going to be covering this for you all the rest of the offseason and then into the regular season. So make sure you guys are keeping an eye on the website, HeelToughBlog.com. You guys can go there. Greg Ward and Alan Lundy, I know both of you guys checked in here as the podcast went along. If you missed the start of the podcast, go back, check it out after we're done here on the live stream, because that's where you get the Andrew Simpson talk. We dived into him, real in depth. And then, you can go over to the website and read the articles about him as well. The article about him, not multiple articles, where I go in depth on the player that Carolina is landing. You can also check out the articles on Tamir Hickman Collins, who Carolina landed recently, and Jordan Owens as well, another guy that is in that tight end room that is hoping to find some solutions and find some answers for quarterback Gio Lopez. So all that stuff is on the website for you guys to check out. Any recruiting news that we get on the 2026 trail, we'll, of course, have you covered. Kind of a little bit of a dead period here until we get to May 30th. That's when Carolina is going to start hosting official visits again. There might be someone that pops up here. I know this was around the time when Nick Reddish was supposed to take his official visit. He moved it back to later in the summer, moved it back into June. So you never know. Someone could crop up here out of nowhere. But right now, Carolina really is just focused on finishing up with the transfer portal and putting together that 2025 roster. I'm going to have an article that comes out that's going to sort of update you on where the every room is. So that'll be nice for you guys to check out as well. It'll be all the scholarship guys, as well as some of the walk-ons that are in each room, and then a little breakdown of where I feel like each room is at. So keep an eye out for that. Plenty of other off-season content that'll be coming your way. On the basketball side of things, Drake Powell made it official today that he is going to the NBA draft. Josh has an article up there back when he did enter the NBA draft that you can go and check out. Now that's official. So Carolina scrambling to try to find some help on the wing. Any news that comes out about that, we will have you covered both on the website with Josh writing there, and then on the podcast side of things, if they do land somebody, we'll be breaking that down. And of course, one of the other stories that we wrote here, unfortunately had to write here in the last few days, is the passing of Larry Miller. Go back and read about one of the true legends of Carolina basketball, a guy that does not get the type of respect that he probably should with some of the other program legends. So go back, read that, listen to the latest edition of the Heel Tough. I got it both confused. I wanted to say Roy's Boys in my head. Go back and listen to the Four Corners latest edition of the podcast, where we do go back to the Roy's Boys days. Josh's interview with Larry Miller, you can hear that. That was when he was coming out with his book, I believe, during that time. So, yeah, go back, check that out, and give that a listen. That's a really cool thing as well that we did back in the day that, will be remembered by us as a podcasting group for a while, and we encourage you guys to go check that out. But that's going to wrap it up for tonight's edition of the podcast. Want to thank Josh for hosting with me. Want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.